everybody, and welcome to Or Something, the podcast where we cover the origin stories of different things or something. I'm Kristen, and this is Karla.
Hi.
There she is. And we're here. This is our special New Year's episode. Woo-hoo-hoo. Karla's silent. She's putting notes into her phone.
My commitment to this moment.
Hey, we get to say goodbye to stupid 2021, which was just a dumpster fire of a year.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, it had good things because we created this podcast, which is really
That's
positive.
True. Well, it's a bit of a dumpster fire anyway.
Involved. Listen,
I'm kidding.
Podcast is amazing, and that person in Fiji is really enjoying it. Prison Fred loves it. He writes me all the time to tell me so.
He doesn't write to me. Listen, Prison Fred.
Oh.
I count too. Oh my gosh. Everybody, say goodbye to this lousy, stinking year. And if anyone out there had a great year, just be quiet.
Yeah, no one wants to hear about it, all right?
Yeah.
I mean, my year is ending very well. I have to say it's ending on a high note. It started on a disgusting, stupid note, and it's been hard. Like, it's been a super hard year. But I'm happy to say I'm... Aww.
I know, but that's okay. Time goes on.
Yeah.
You know what is a great high note, though? I just want to encourage everybody. This is airing... The show that I'm watching, it started airing possibly November. But everybody watch Universe. It's the new BBC I think it's BBC show series about all the newest stuff that they're learning about the solar system and everything. And it's hosted by Brian Cox, who's one of my favorite presenters of all time. And it's such a good series. It's amazing. My mind has been blown 50,007 times. Kill me. This year has just broken me.
And you guys witnessed it on the podcast that Karla just officially broke in half. Her brain shattered before me. Oh my gosh.
How was your Christmas?
It was great. How was your Christmas? We're recording this early. Christmas hasn't happened yet, you guys.
Yeah, so I'm gonna guess so.
I was in yours. Oh, yours was so.
Yeah, I'm guessing.
This is really optimistic. You have high hopes.
Can we look back at this year?
Do you have
I'll be happy.
Do you have any traditions over New Year's that you always do? Or do you not really have any structure around it?
I'm going to be honest. I've never, ever enjoyed New Year's. Ever. It is actually one of my least favorite holidays. I'm not a party person. I don't like going out to clubs. I don't I liked some parties when I was younger. When I was a kid, we'd go to the Polish Hall. They'd always have these great fun parties. And I kind of feel with Polish people, it's fun. You just get together, get drunk, and it's just
so
grand
fun.
old
They
time.
love dancing.
Yes, it's all dancing
just
and
drunk.
Yeah, I did just learn. I was talking to my mom the other day about New Year's and traditions there, and she said it really annoyed her. Back in Poland, they would actually stop the music at midnight so they could all for about half an hour, so they could all after the countdown.
Oh,
so
okay.
They would stop and give each other well wishes and kind of talk to each other and that kind of thing. And
really?
she said it was really annoying because here it's very much, and Polish people here do it too, where it's just time to crank up the music and party as soon as it's midnight, right?
My gosh.
But there, they were very much let's chat and wish each other well. I'm ugh.
I know, that sounds terrible.
buzzkill.
She wants that? She doesn't want the music pumped back up?
No. She said she did
didn't
not like that. That's how.
Yeah, it's just keep partying
music.
Because at that
my mom's
point, too.
Total party animal.
She is.
Yes. So is my dad. It was really
Your
fun.
dad is the funniest party animal. So this is one of the very earliest memories in our friendship. When I came to your house, because we discovered we met each other in high school, and we discovered that we lived 2 blocks away from each other, which was unusual because neither one of us lived close to the high school we went to. Right. So we were pretty far out there.
Yeah.
And then you invited me over to your house for some party. I can't remember what it was
some
for.
party. Who knows?
But
They
all
all
your
turned out
aunts
to
and
be the
uncles
same.
and cousins
Yeah.
and stuff were there. And like it was super fun. We like blasted music in the basement. We were all dancing in the basement and like having a really fun time. Your dad was super drunk.
Yeah.
But he's a happy drunk, or he was at that point anyway. At that point in the night, he was a super happy drunk, and he loves like getting everybody together, like, come on. And my memory from that night was him dancing and like body checking me into the wall. And you guys were like, you were so embarrassed where you're like, this is my new friend. Like, what's happening? You guys were apologizing so much. And I was laughing so hard. I'm like, what is happening in this situation? It was awesome. I was like, yes.
Yeah. Welcome to the mosh pit that is this party. Like, what is happening? Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, we had a blast with those parties. Like but yeah, and we only had a few like New Year's parties like that when I was little. But then my parents started going to the Polish hall, so they kind of dragged us when we were a little bit older, right? But generally, like, and New Year's like depresses me. I'm not a happy person generally, so like saying kind of like marking a new year just makes me anxious, and like I don't like it. It's like my birthdays. I don't like my birthdays either, because
I love my birthday.
They just depress me. The only thing that's positive about a birthday is like I treat it as a day where I can just do whatever I want.
Yeah.
I give myself permission
to
just
birthday.
Yeah,
do
exactly.
Whatever the hell you want.
So that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And I don't really like getting gifts. I like when people get themselves gifts on my birthday. It's kind of like I want everybody to have fun on my birthday, right? So it's like treat yourself. But so I'm total Debbie Downer, unfortunately, on New Year's. I just like to stay home. I don't even like to watch countdowns anymore, or I don't do the champagne thing really. I'm like, I just want this to be over.
Aww.
So what about you?
I don't like traditional New Year's where people are so like, what's your New Year's resolution? I hate New Year's resolutions. I kind of think like, to me, I'm like, oh, it's not so life-changing because it's just another day, right? Like I used to get really angry at all this stuff. But now I think as I'm getting older, I'm like, you know what? There's so, again, Debbie Downer, there's so little in life to like celebrate, and like I kind of like taking any occasion to create some kind of celebration. I don't take it very seriously at all.
Yeah.
Like it's not like it's the be all end all. I think I used to get so frustrated by all the girls that would go out on New Year's Eve and it had to be perfect and it had to be this thing, and people put so much weight and pressure on it, and it's like, no, it's just,
and that's what I did, and
just enjoy it.
That's probably why I ended up hating it a lot of time, because like I was never the popular pretty girl, and it was very like I've never belonged in clubs, right? I never really like went out on dates or anything, and it was like I wasn't gonna have like the classic like 1930s the movie, where everybody's like having this beautiful New Year's, and then there's like the New Year's kiss and everything, and I'd be like, well, it's not gonna happen for me, so I'm just gonna walk over here and go sit in a
I know, I hated all of that came along with it. We always did I guess the only tradition that we had really when I was younger was we always went to go see the fireworks. Like especially because we lived in Edmonton.
I never did that.
And it's because my dad is really cheap, and it was a free like New Year's celebration in the city. So he's like, you guys, let's get in on this and let's see how many things we can go to without paying any money for it. Like he'd make us park so far away so he could get free parking, and we'd be walking. It's like minus 30 degrees Celsius, like so cold. But we would always go and watch the fireworks, which was always pretty cool. So that's like, I always associate those things together.
And they were earlier, right? They did the earlier.
Yeah, they would do the early, like the baby fireworks for the younger kids. And then you'd have like the fireworks at midnight for.
Right. Did you do the midnight ones?
I think quite often, because my brother and sister were older than me, they could stay, and then it was just, okay, well, that's fine.
My friends, for Canada Day, that was our big thing. We would go see the fireworks then, and we just, but no, never New Year's, I don't think.
Yeah.
I was missing out, I think. I feel like that would be fun.
It was fun.
Kind of.
Yeah, I mean, it has its pros and cons, like everything, but
like having to walk so far from your car.
Exactly. Yeah, and like my dad dragging us around trying to convince us it's going to be fun. Like, come on, do this, it's going to be great. And you're like, even though it is fun, you just really don't want to admit it to him that you're like having an okay time and it'll be a good memory or whatever. You're like, no, stop telling me what to do. It's a complicated relationship we have.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, who's first this week? Is it me? I think I'm first,
It's
right?
you.
Yeah. Ooh.
I always like when you're first.
Okay, this is a great segue, what we were just talking about, into my topic, because
Great.
I was going to do, going on the New Year's theme, I was going to do the origins of fireworks, because that is what I connect to New Year's.
That would have been,
And I did
clever
half
thinking.
of it. I did a whole bunch of research for it, wrote half of my thing. And then I was like, I realized that so many people were talking about it with like the 4th of July or with those things. And I was like, I think actually for other people, they have a much more of an association with the summer festivities of like Canada Day or,
Right.
4th of July or something like that. That I was like,
Yeah.
so it made me really question. I'm like, do people connect that with New Year's? Like, so
do.
then I was like, okay, I'm not going to do that. So instead, I
You
thought
could have.
something that people connect with New Year's and all kinds of other stuff
Oh.
is champagne. So I'm
Okay.
doing the origins
Can
of
I
champagne.
just say, I'm not talking to you now. I'm talking to the listener. Okay. Hi, guy or girl.
Prison Fred.
Yeah, prison bread. So Kristen was like, you know what? Let's just do a themed thing. And I'm like, really? For New Year's? There are like, what, 3 things that are associated with New Year's Eve? I have been so anxious for like the whole week. I just settled on a topic yesterday. Because I'm like, we're going to overlap. And I was this close to doing champagne because I'm just
Were you
like...
really? No
Yes.
way.
Because I know the story and it
Oh
is
my
kind of
gosh.
self-explanatory, but there's a lot to it that is
Yeah.
very interesting. And I was
Yeah.
like, I forgot a lot of it, don't worry. So you're
Yeah.
going to surprise me. But like, I was so close to doing champagne. And
Oh
I'm
my gosh.
Just so mad at you because of course...
Damn
like,
it.
Oh, what if we had the same topic?
I know. And then when you texted me because you were freaking out about it, and I was like, but my topic is just like New Year's adjacent. Like it's used for other
so it killed me.
things.
Everything related to New Year's is New Year's adjacent. Like my topic is New Year's adjacent.
I was
Fireworks are
going
New
to
Year's
change
adjacent.
mine. I was going to change mine to
Again?
do like where did that old Lang Syne
Yeah,
song
I
come
almost
from?
did that.
Yeah. But then I was like, I can't do that because I told her mine isn't specific to New Year's. Only New Year's.
Okay,
Like,
if
damn
we
it,
do
you
make it to the
guys.
next New Year show, if it's still happening, then we are gonna
We
tell
need
each
to
other.
pre-designate. I know.
Yeah,
we were
it'll be
almost
our
going to
one-
cheat this time.
Yeah, and our special thing, I don't know, we could do it drunk or something. I was debating if I should
we
drink.
should. We should drink champagne while we're doing it.
I know.
I have eggnog and rum right now in my kitchen.
Oh, I can't have eggnog anymore. I got food poisoning once, and
What? Oh,
that's what my brain
no.
associated eggnog with it.
Oh.
And now I
that's
can't have it anymore.
Oh, I'm sorry. That
Oh my
sucks.
god, what is this depressing episode? Can we
I don't
let's
know.
just
Let's
go
move
back
on.
to
We should be
partying.
drinking champagne. Okay. So, the origins of champagne.
Nice.
Okay, so I've got a lot of information about this, and there is so much more out there. So I kind of tried to like whittle it down a bit and like I don't know,
Champagne
put some-
France done.
Yep.
I did your thing for you.
Oh
don't
my
have to.
gosh,
Let's
thank
party.
you.
You're welcome.
Let's party. Just by clearly we've demonstrated that we're quite in quite a dark mood. Right
Well, now I want to party.
I'll show you.
Yeah.
Okay, so still wines were being made in the Champagne region of France before medieval times. The Romans were the first to plant vineyards in these areas as early as the 5th century.
Whoa.
And at this time, vineyards were entirely in the hands of the monasteries. On Christmas Day in 496 AD, the Frankish warrior Clovis was baptized at Reims Cathedral. Or Reims Cathedral?
I think people said Rem,
Rem?
but I don't remember.
Oh, damn it. Okay. And
Just
crowned
say Reims. Why not?
crowned the first king of France.
Oh,
Clovis, the first king of France. I didn't know that's what his name was.
me neither.
So Reims was Rem was effectively the capital of the province of Champagne, and the wines used in the consecration were all wines from the Champagne region, all still wines.
Oh, sorry, I'm a ding dong. I keep forgetting it's a region. Just I
Yeah.
thought it was actual kind of town.
No, it's like a province, right? Yeah.
Right. Okay.
A few centuries later, the Countess of Champagne, whose name was Joan the First, I don't know why. That makes me laugh so hard from that.
It's like
Like
Linda.
Joan. Yeah, it's like Linda the First or like Brenda the Benevolent. I don't know. Like it was such a funny name. Oh my gosh. Countess of Champagne married Philip IV, the King of France. So there's a huge tie between this region and royalty, is what I'm trying to establish here. From the year 898 onwards, all of the French kings were crowned in Rheims, or at the Rheims Cathedral. So despite the royal connection to the Champagne region wines, the people of this area became very envious of the reputation of the wines made by their neighbors in the region of Burgundy. And they wanted to make wines that would be able to rival them. However, their more northerly climate made it challenging for them to make bold red wines that was common in Burgundy and Bordeaux and those places. That was all a really rich, like deep red wines.
Wait, give me 1 second. Just pause for don't not the podcast. Just listen for a second.
Rance.
Rance, apparently.
Rance?
Rance. It's like Raans. That's how they're...
Rance.
Yeah.
Oh.
That's how they... What?
Okay.
Rance.
Because it's spelled R-E-I-M-S, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Rance.
Oh, weird.
Okay.
Rance.
Weird. Well,
sorry,
I never have
I
to
just...
say it again.
Oh, okay.
Oh. I'll go back and re-record it. Okay, so because they had this northerly climate, the grapes wouldn't grow in the same way, and the growing time kind of got cut off because it got cold earlier than in the other places that could have these like really like rich-bodied red wines. So the wines from Champagne would be lighter bodied and thinner than the Burgundy wines they wanted to outdo. The Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier grapes grown in the Champagne region were all really well suited for sparkling wine production, though. They like fit with that.
Okay.
The northern location, it was cooler, so obviously like they couldn't grow as much, but that coolness gave the grapes the proper acidity for sparkling wines, which is why they tasted better from there than from, say, other regions in France. Like Burgundy didn't have...
To explain the origin of sparkling wines, too? Because
I am
when did
going
this happen?
to be talking about it right away.
Yay.
The oldest recorded sparkling wine was called Blanquette de Limoux, or Lemieux, I don't know, and was invented by Benedictine monks near Carcassonne in 1531.
You guys, Carcassonne is the best board game in the history of the world.
It is pretty good.
It's so good. Oh my gosh.
So they achieved this by bottling the wine before the first fermentation had ended. Over a century later, an English scientist, so not a French guy, an English scientist and physician named Christopher Merritt discovered that the addition of sugar to a finished wine would create a second fermentation. So he presented a paper outlining this process, and he called it the Method Traditionnelle at the Royal Society in 1662.
What?
This method later became known as Method Champenoise. So it's the way you make champagne, is by having the second fermentation thing. So he presented this paper and outlined it, saying this is how you do it in this method.
What?
His discovery also coincided with English glassmakers developing processes that allowed stronger bottles to be made that could withstand the internal pressure that increased during the second fermentation.
Oh.
So at that time, that's basically kind of the beginnings of like getting the extra bubbly stuff for champagne specifically.
So champagne specifically, do you know, was it... Because, like, things are stored in, like, casks or barrels, usually. So champagne ferments
initially for the first
barrel?
They ferment. That's the initial kind of thing. Yeah. And then they bottle it, and then they do the second one in the bottles.
Wow.
Yeah. And the first sparkling champagne was actually created accidentally.
Don't tell me it's that pigment thing. Remember the pigment? How they like, what was it? Where they needed to do add carbon or whatever to a thing? And it's like,
Oh my gosh, yeah, where it's like so elaborate,
dung.
a very elaborate accident.
Yeah.
The pressure in the bottles led early champagne to be called the devil's wine because the bottles would explode and corks would pop. They had no way of like controlling that stuff. And at the time, bubbles were considered a fault because remember, in that region, they were trying to emulate and trying to like outdo the other regions in front, like Burgundy specifically, because they were neighboring them to the south.
Okay.
So they were trying to outdo those people. So they were like, no, bubbles were not what they wanted. They weren't trying to make a sparkling wine. That's not what they wanted to do. So, but even when it was deliberately produced as a sparkling wine, champagne for a long time was made by like the other method of making sparkling wine. So the early one where it's only fermented once and it's kind of more of like an accidental thing. Mm-hmm. Champagne did not use the method champenoise until the 19th century. So it's about 200 years after Merit first documented the process.
What?
Which is crazy that for 200 years they didn't actually use that process to make it.
Yeah.
Isn't that nuts? I don't know why. Maybe because it was an English guy, but...
So champagne, as a bubbly beverage, they made it before this Merit thing was picked up, right? Or no?
Yeah. So...
But when did it become desirable if they were like, bubbles suck?
I'll get there. Just wait.
Sorry. I'm so excited. I'm sorry.
Okay, so I'm going to do a really quick rundown of the method that is used. Okay, so champagne starts its life like any normal wine. The grapes are harvested, they're pressed, and they undergo a primary fermentation. Uh-huh. The acidic results of this are then bottled with a bit of yeast and sugar, which prompt it to undergo a second fermentation in the bottle. The second fermentation is what gives champagne its bubbles. So that second fermentation is required to do the bubbling. Okay. The yeast starts working on the sugar, and then it dies and becomes what is known as lees, L-E-E-S. Oh. The bottles are then stored horizontally, so the wine can age on lees for 15 months or more. So in some places, like I've actually been to some like sparkling wine places here, because they can't call it champagne here, but I'll get into that later. And they actually have them they're not perfectly horizontal. They're kind of on an angle, and you actually go and you're supposed to rotate them, like rotate the bottle so that it's like evenly sitting properly. Okay. And that's part of like the whole process. So there are whole places where they have like masses of bottles, and it's somebody's job to go and turn them all like by a quarter, like by certain degrees each time. It's crazy. So after it's aged, the winemakers turn the bottles upside down so the lees can settle in the bottleneck. And then once the dead yeast has settled, they open the bottles to remove the yeast. They add a little bit of sugar to like make it sweeter, more sweet. They don't. Yeah. They can change it depending on how sweet they want it to be. And then they put a cork in it, and then it's ready. So the 19th century saw
I want to see that.
What?
I want to see how they take it out. Because if it's upside down and it's settled, then when they flip it, does it sink back down, or like does it just float?
I have no idea. That's a very good question. I didn't even think of that. Of course, yeah. The 19th century saw an insane growth in champagne production, going from a regional production of 300,000 bottles a year in the year 1800 to 20 million bottles in 1850 a year. What? Yeah. What? So it just exploded and like went mental. Whoa. In 2007, champagne sales hit an all-time record high of 338.7 million bottles sold in that year. Dang. Isn't that nuts? So sparkling wines are produced worldwide, but the name champagne is legally protected in the European Union and over 70 other countries around the world. This protection was included as part of a treaty that was signed in 1891. And the protection was reaffirmed in the Treaty of Versailles after World War I. Isn't that crazy? The only wines that can legally be called champagne are the ones that meet the strict set of rules and regulations that are set out by the champagne winemaking community, that like from the actual region of Champagne, and a government organization. They have like all of the names for these places are really long and French, so that's why I'm being very vague about the group. They have actual group names.
I understand.
So these rules include super specific details about what they are allowed to do. So this includes pruning, like how to prune, when to prune, like all the everything included in pruning, vineyard yield, the type of grapes used, where the grapes are grown, like exactly specifically like the piece of land that they're grown on in the region of Champagne, the degree of pressing, the time the wine remains on lees before bottling, like all of these things. So it's like elaborate rules.
Makes sense though, right? Because what if you're just some cheap bumpkin in like the Champagne region and you're like trying to grow your own grapes and you're like, this is legit. And they're like, no, it's not.
So it's only people that meet all of these standards that are allowed to use the name Champagne.
The name Champagne. Wait, just to clarify, because I'm a ding dong. So sparkling wines they didn't come first.
They came first. They existed before like Champagne as we know it came.
Oh.
Yeah. They existed, and they've existed in other places, like where they made sparkling wine.
So what was the Champagne? Why was that all fancy and like...
Well, it has to do with their marketing, which I'm going to talk about coming up.
Dang it! Okay.
I know, right? So these rules, the rules that are like that say if you can call it champagne or not, these rules can also limit the release of champagne to the market in order to maintain prices. So they have control, like these two groups have control over all of the things to do with champagne. So they've been very, I think, strict and clever about how to manage like the release of champagne and making it desirable and all that kind of stuff, and keeping the prices high and whatever.
So is that the argument that they're the ones who created a desirable product, or was this something that became highly coveted before it became like a cash cow kind of thing for people? Do you know?
I think it's a combination. Like I think they became
like, it wasn't like
strict.
A queen was like, oh, I like whatever this bubbly thing is, and then they were like, let's cha-ching, like
let's cash in on it. No, it was a bit more strategic than that.
Okay.
And the people in Champagne, I think in that region, because they really wanted, their intention was to make a wine that was better, that would rival they kind of set out with that intention. I think they were a little bit more like, they really wanted to make sure that they were protecting themselves and the people, the winemakers and the people growing the wine.
Where was that switch from like, this is undesirable bubbles to suddenly we've got this, like this is let's own these bubbles?
I know. Well, I'll kind of get to it a little bit, but
I'm so impatient.
Yeah. So just to go along with the name thing, so in 2008, more than 3,000 bottles of sparkling wine in California were labeled as champagne erroneously, and they were destroyed by the Belgian government authorities.
No.
Because they were like, that's not allowed, so they just destroyed them all.
Whoa.
Isn't that crazy? So it's just an example of like, they take it seriously.
I want that job. I want to go to somebody's house and just smash.
I know. There are some places here, like I've seen it here, where they just use the word champagne, but it's technically not legal for them to do that. So if you see one,
I saw a
isn't
couple
an actual
bottles that says champagne, and I thought, right? It didn't seem right. I was like,
yeah, it's not legal, and most places respect it. And there are other, like all kinds of other names for sparkling wine that is just as good, and whatever. They just can't legally call it champagne.
But not all sparkling wines are champagne. But champagne is a sparkling wine, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Because you have to be from. Okay.
Yeah. So, why did champagne become this high standard when everyone was making sparkling wine? Like, why did champagne become the thing that now is, people just use it as the term for all sparkling wine, basically? Yeah. So, the champagne producers were super duper clever in their marketing. And I think that now,
marketing.
Through all of our episodes, it's like, how often now does it come down to, oh, they were just really clever marketers, or they were really good, savvy business people.
Right.
Like, that's ultimately how so many of these decisions like come about, and it becomes the thing that we know the most, right? Yeah. So they marketed the wine's image as a royal and aristocratic drink. So they drew on like their ties to the royalty and all that kind of stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
But so that's kind of like understandable, where it's like, okay, cool. It was like super desirable by all the high end people, right? But the thing that made it really popular and really explode was at the same time that they were doing this, saying it's a royal aristocratic drink, they also were portraying champagne as a luxury that was enjoyable by anyone for any occasion. So they were saying this is super high end and it's luxurious, but also the everyman can enjoy it. So that's where it became really popular with everybody, because it was accessible in a way.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So by the turn of the 20th century, the majority of champagne drinkers were actually middle class. It wasn't necessarily the aristocrats, right?
Yeah.
Something else that they did in their marketing was that in the 19th century, they made a concentrated effort to market their wine to women.
Oh.
So they would draw associations between the sweeter champagne and women, whereas they would connect the dry champagne, so the more dry versions of it, with men and foreign markets. Mm-hmm. They had ad campaigns touting that famous women loved champagne. So there was like this famous countess, wives of earls and barons and whatever, a really famous opera singer. They like did ads with her in it. Champagne labels were designed with images of romantic love and marriage, as well as other special occasions that were deemed important to women, such as a child's baptism or something like that. So they specifically targeted women. And this was extremely different from what was going on with other French wine regions, specifically in Burgundy and Bordeaux. And like their advertising had a traditionally male aura around all of their marketing. It was very male centric. They spoke to the men, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So this was a very different thing for them to do, to specifically market it for women and to market it around specific occasions as well, was a big thing, which you can see now is it's common for certain events where you're like, oh, you're getting married, we're going to do a champagne toast. Oh, New Year's, we're going to do a champagne toast. You know, like all these specific occasions, it's something that you know, whip out at an occasion.
A certain elegance too, I think, right?
Yeah.
Like people, they talk about like the champagne towers and champagne dreams and all that kind of thing. And it's just like, it's funny.
Exactly. Like it still has this like luxurious, you know, high end feel to it, but it is accessible so that you can feel that high end thing.
Oh my
gosh. It's
gosh.
crazy how they've kind of like balanced that line, that fine line between the two. Mm-hmm. Because it's still used, it's still like high end people still drink it, and it's still, you know, it is still all of those things as well. So something else that they did that was super clever was that they would also create different labels for different events. So, for example, the centennial of the French Revolution, they created special labels for this big event in France. But the thing that they did that was very interesting was that they created labels for both sides. So they created specific labels that had pictures of Marie Antoinette in like a very martyr type pose for the people who were sympathetic to like the aristocrats and the royalty and that kind of thing, because there still were those groups of people that were on board with it. So they had those where she was beautiful and like this beautiful picture. But then they also created labels that had these amazing revolutionary scenes with like the revolutionaries being like these great people and whatever.
Dang.
And they sold both of them at the same time.
Stink butts.
I know. So really, they did such a good job. They were like, we're going to market to literally everybody.
Just
and
straddling
just put it out there.
Gosh.
And people ate it up. They loved it.
That's hilarious.
The last little thing about their marketing thing that I found very interesting was as World War I was starting to ramp up, they put images of soldiers and country flags specific to each country that it was exported to. So if they were exporting it to Britain, they did that, like put soldiers and British flags, and they did it
Marketing
for a number.
Geniuses.
I know.
Oh my gosh.
Isn't that crazy? Like
scuzzy,
so
but I
clever.
Still admire it. Yeah.
I mean, it's clever.
They
like
could never get away with that now because people,
No.
it's almost like, companies have to have some kind of platform or have to choose
because
sides
now
almost,
we would
right?
be because we would
we'd
have
call
the
them out on it.
information, because we'd be able to see, like, wait a second, you also were giving that to those people, so whose side are
Right.
you on? Because we can tell right away. But back at
Yeah.
that time, if you're shipping all the champagne to Britain, the people in Britain are not going to see that you sent stuff to wherever, Spain or whatever, like that
my
had
gosh.
those different imagery on it. They're not going to see that.
Man, yeah, it's like they don't care who buys it.
Yeah, they're like, we just
It
want
is the
someone to
devil's
buy
drink.
it. It is. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Okay, so when I looked up all of my research, a big thing that came up was that people thought that this guy had wrongfully been the one to invent champagne because his name is quite synonymous with champagne.
Someone's been drinking too much champagne.
I know, right? I wish that it was because of that.
I know, right?
So I asked the question, who is Dom Perignon? Because people think that he invented champagne and he did not.
Oh, I didn't think he did, but that's interesting.
I know, because his name, that is like, his name is such a huge brand
It's
or
like
type
a
of champagne.
higher
It's very
price
high
bracket. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So he was a French Benedictine monk who was alive from 1638 to 1715, and he was like a contemporary of Louis XIV, so alive at that same time.
Right.
So he made important contributions to the production and quality of champagne, but he did not invent champagne.
Okay.
It is commonly but incorrectly thought that he did invent it.
Okay.
The famous champagne made by Moet and Chandon is named for him. Their winery is located in the remains of the monastery where he spent his adult life. So they've
Wait.
Moet.
What was named for him?
Their famous champagne. So it's called Dom Perignon.
Okay. Sorry.
So it's not the overall brand. The brand is Moet and Chandon, right?
Yeah.
But their line of champagne is named Dom Perignon. It's like a high level. His name is Dom Perignon.
So Dom Perignon. Yeah, but like it wasn't its own like maker of like its own house, like, or whatever they're called. Like
no.
Even though he contributed to the improving the quality of it and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, they just named one of their champagnes after him as like an homage to him, basically.
But what did he do? He was just his own guy.
I'm going to talk about it.
Oh.
Patience.
I'm
young
sorry.
grasshopper. Okay, so it's a famous champagne. So their winery, it's so kind of connected to him in a way that because their winery is in the remains of the monastery where he spent his adult life. At the time that he was alive, the in-bottle re-fermentation of the wine, so the second fermentation, was a huge problem for winemakers. So at this time, it was massively difficult. The bottles would get really volatile and often explode, which would not only damage the product, because it make, like, if one of them exploded, it would set off a chain reaction, and sometimes they could lose like 90% of their yield or whatever.
I shouldn't laugh, but it's kind of funny.
I know, it is kind of a funny image.
What a thing to put your money into. Exploding
Oh my gosh,
bottles.
I know, right? But it could also be dangerous for vineyard employees. So some workers, they had to wear these heavy iron masks to protect themselves because they're otherwise, like, glass bottles are blowing up basically in your face. So it was like this really volatile thing. So originally, he was actually tasked with finding a way to take the bubbles out of the wine. Because it was back in the time where they're like, we don't want these bubbles here. Like, how do we get this out?
But why did they do the second fermentation at all?
Because, so something here is that because of the cold or they were using white grapes.
Right.
And the colder climate there, the white grapes were much more, would frequently go into, like, they would re-ferment again really easily. Like, they were, I think, more acidic or something.
Yeah, you said that, yeah.
Oh, yeah, they tended to enter re-fermentation more frequently. And so what would happen is that like over the winter they'd bottle them and whatever. They'd do the harvest in the fall. They bottled them up, whatever. But as stuff started to warm up again in the spring, just naturally a lot of the wines would start. It would be kick them into like a second fermentation in things. So they were trying to figure out a way to make that stop happening, to like reduce that from happening, because they didn't want the sparkles in the wine.
Right.
And then they ended up leaning into it. Okay, so he originally was kind of like brought on to find a way to take the bubbles out of the wine, but instead he ended up introducing some features that ended up becoming hallmarks of Champagne today. So that's why he's kind of held up as like this guy. So he said that fine wine should only be made from Pinot Noir grapes and should be an extensive blend of grapes from multiple vineyards. So not just from one spot. He wasn't fond of white grapes because they tended to enter re-fermentation more frequently and like more easily. He also said that the vines should be aggressively pruned, which is something that you see now. Like if you go, to the Okanagan, the vineyards there, they're all like, the vines are really teeny tiny. And it's specifically like you have to shock them into kind of like growing fruit. It's you're keeping them kind of in this weird state. So he came up with some of that initial stuff. He was also an early advocate of winemaking using only natural processes without adding any foreign substances into it. He did a whole bunch of other stuff, but it was all kind of vague and not very interesting.
I like the mixed grape thing. It reminds me of our apple episode, how I mentioned that applesauce made with like a variety of apples is just superior, right? And it kind of makes sense, right?
That's the thing, and I think before...
Not white grapes, but what grapes did he use then?
So Pinot Noir he was a big fan of, so they're red grapes.
Oh, those are grape?
Yeah.
Red? Oh,
yeah.
So why isn't it red? I'm dumb.
I don't think that... So most... I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I think they mixed it with a bunch of other grapes. And you can use those grapes for... It's pretty complex, but you can like take the skins off and you can do all kinds of other stuff and whatever. I don't know. Winemaking is like crazy.
The whole thing, yeah.
So stop asking me questions about it.
Sorry.
Okay, my last very little point that kind of came off of some of my research was why champagne flutes. Like, why do we drink champagne out of a different type of glass than we drink other wines out of? Like, I know red wines and white wines have slightly different glasses.
I think I know the answer.
Do you guess it?
I'm guessing that it has less surface area on the top for the bubbles to escape.
You're right.
Yeah.
But so it's that, and combined with like having the long flute part of it, like the long part, is because you can see the bubbles, and they found it like there was more of a visual impact of being able to see the bubbles. So they didn't do just like a short little glass of just a little bit or whatever. They wanted to have it like tall and then a small surface area so that it kept the carbonation in there.
Nice.
And that's it. That's the history of champagne, the origins of champagne. I mean, there's so much other information. I didn't go into like why they had the corks and the cages on the corks, and because there's so many people involved in it.
Yeah. That's so good. Oh my gosh. Dang.
Darn, I wish we had champagne right now. Clink.
I know. Clink. Why are we making sounds?
It always freaks me out to like, I hate taking the cork out of champagne. It always scares me that it's going to like...
Oh, yeah.
Fly into my face and blind me or something.
Oh, I know. Or break something horrible. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. I was terrified of that thing. And usually it's nothing. Like,
usually it's fine.
I mean, it is fun to let it go fly, but I have to say, I'm not, I don't really drink too many alcoholic things. Like, I'm just not a fan generally, but like for taste, right? Because, and I'm a poor drunk. I just get sleepy. I don't turn into one of those fun kind of drunks. It's like, so it's not very fun. But so I don't like wine, but champagne I've always loved. It's so, I like the lighter stuff. Cider, anything bubbly, I'm just like, yep.
And I used to not like champagne, but I really enjoy it now. I think because I know a little bit more about like how to find ones that I like. You know
what? That's the key, because I had one just last year that was not very good, and I thought, do I not like it anymore? And I'm like, well, no, ding dong, it's just you have a specific one, right?
Yeah.
Okay, are you ready to party? We got ourselves drunk on champagne.
Yes.
Now we're going to learn about The Origin of Discotheques.
No way.
Yep.
Party.
Yeah.
Oh,
Because
I love that.
It's such a like European kind of thing. Like, you know, I think of it as like such a like Polish, like discoteca, like people would be like, you know, and it's just you go out and you party. And I think that's such a New Year's thing.
Yes. I
It
love
is, again, New Year's adjacent. Like this could relates to, you know, all nightlife, but come on.
I love it. Oh my gosh, we've got a drink and we're going to go dancing.
Dancing, right?
Yeah.
Even though that's not what I ever do. I sit
In
at home
theory.
and eat some brie, melted brie.
But we all know the origin of that was, I don't know where I'm going with that joke. Please cut that out.
We're drunk. It's okay. No.
We're
Keeping
damn
it. Yeah, I can if you want. I'll put like
God.
like dance music just right over it. So
Oh my
people
God,
kind of
you
have to
should
sort
too.
of hear. Okay, discotheque, the word. So it can be found all the way back in like 1927, 30s. So it was Italian.
really? That early?
Word, discoteca. Where disco, like I guess the root of it, right, means phonograph record, and teca is like collection. So basically a record library.
Cool.
And if you think of like discography, it's kind of a thing. Yeah. So
oh my gosh,
discotheque
then,
itself.
so anybody who wants to go out and party, but they're not supposed to, and your parents are like, no, you just be like, I'm going to the library. And you can get away with it. It'll be fine.
Yeah, basically.
I love it.
So a discotheque is a nightclub for dancing to recorded music. And they often feature very sophisticated sound systems, elaborate lighting, and other effects. So some discotheques, yeah, people can argue that there was live music sometimes, right? Because
Okay.
people would perform. But generally, it's, you know,
It's the difference
the whole
between,
point is
you're not going
records.
to like a show with a house band or something.
Exactly.
Like that there. Okay.
Yeah. So just to be clear, there were nightclubs.
Okay.
Before this, there like the jazz type clubs of like 1920s and that kind of thing.
Oh,
in
okay. Yeah.
Paris and clubs, they were like people would go, but it kind of wasn't a huge thing to just go and dance and have like the whole nightlight thing with the lights and that kind of thing. So I am focusing very, very on the specific type of thing, the discotheque.
Okay.
And it is related to disco music a lot too. So, but let's kind of go back a little. So this starts very dark and it ends very dark. What a happy topic.
So it's on brand
So
with this episode.
exactly. Debbie Downers around. Okay. So during World War II in Paris, live music was banned by the Nazis in obviously Nazi occupied France.
Right.
So the dance halls would actually play records. So they were primarily
Okay.
like jazz clubs at the time. So they would play jazz records, and that's how they could get away with it, right? So it wouldn't be like this
loophole.
band lumbering in their instruments, and Nazis are like, "Hey, you, what are you doing?" You just go in with your little backpack, I guess, and play some
Yeah.
records. So I started by looking at like what the disco music, how disco music started itself, because I thought it went hand in hand with the discotheque. I don't know if they're dependent on each other. Like it sounds like they are, but they're kind of not. I don't know. But I just wanted to get into disco music briefly. So basically the defining thing of the disco beat, it's called 4 on the floor or 4 to the floor beat. And it's a very basic. So I had to look it up. It says it's the name given to a rhythm pattern that is primarily associated with dance music and disco music. So it's still used, obviously. The beat itself is characterized by a uniformly accented beat in 4/4 time, with the bass drum being hit on every beat. So it's basically a simple 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, right? Yeah, and it could go any. And I heard it in different like speeds, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, right? That and
Yeah.
or slower. So I think it's just a nice steady kind of
A steady
thing.
rhythm,
beat.
like a steady beat.
Yeah. And one guy said that you could hear the 1, 2, 3, 4, like say in like Lindy Hop music, but earlier, right? And I watched this really great video on YouTube. Where was that? Oh no, I didn't write down his thing. Oh, right. This guy from the Auckland Philharmonica Orchestra, he explains 4 on the floor in a video. His name is, he was the principal percussionist, Eric Rennick. I just wanted to say, like, encourage people to go listen. It's a short video, but he explains Four on the Floor, and he's just I get really excited when I see really good musicians. Like, he's such a good drummer. So, like, right away, he just does a little, like, sample of the beat.
Yeah.
And explains it, and it's just a really cool kind of thing, introduction. And he said that basically with disco music, you start hearing the hi-hat more, like that kind of cymbal sound as a 1, 2, 3, 4 sort of thing. And and when you start listening to disco music, you can kind of really hear that more like cymbal-y kind of, you know. So it's like a hi-hat kind of thing. But the way he describes the beat is like a relentless heartbeat. So it's just a steady 1, 2, 3, 4 over and over.
You know what's so crazy is that I didn't actually ever stop to think what made disco music different from other genres of music.
Yeah.
I didn't think about the music itself. I thought about the disco culture in the 70s.
Right.
Like, that's
because that's how we just kind of pigeonhole it, right? But yeah, disco music has its own, like, origin and kind of like sound
crazy that you
to
don't
it,
even
right?
think about that. Oh my gosh. And then it had such early starts in a way.
Right. And it did start like the 1, 2, 3, 4. There was like, you hear it in Motown and stuff like James Brown. Brown's drummer was doing like more funky beats and that kind of thing. But he credits a band, Earl Young, the drummer from a Philadelphia band called Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes. The song called, he said, he encourages people to go listen to the song called The Love I Lost. And he said it's the first real commercial existence of the hi-hat being the driving sound of disco. So when you hear the song, you'll hear it. You'll be like, oh yeah, there's that beat. And okay, I watched the official Soul Train performance of this song.
Okay.
I almost died from laughter. Okay, so I don't know if people don't know what Soul Train is. It was just, how do you describe it? Like a show where they would have, I guess, live performances and sometimes just music and basically just people dancing, and you would watch it on TV and it was really amazing, and it was African American community and they were just awesome, and the song was a lot more mellow than I expected. Like, it's kind of like more heartbreaky kind of like love kind of song, but not as, because with disco you just automatically assume it's going to be this like
like super
thumping kind of like
upbeat,
upbeat fast kind of thing. But the funny part is that the dancers were just going for it. You could see they were just dying to just let loose and dance really hard and fast. But the song was kind of not, the beat was there though, so they could dance. But I was crying. I'm like, you guys calm down.
Not
like,
compute.
But
read the room, guys. Read the room.
But it was so cute because they were just like, the song barely started and they were like the little like jerky robot dancing and then the cool 70s moves. And I'm like, I can't with you guys. You're so enthusiastic. It's so cute. Okay, anyway. So disco music, kind of, but even the culture can be seen as a reaction by the 1960s. In the 1960s, to both the dominance of rock music and the stigmatization of dance music at the time. So America was very much like rock music, and like there was a little bit of the psychedelic stuff happening at the same time.
Okay.
A little tiny bit.
And very
but
folksy.
Disco music was
like,
exactly. Yeah, and disco was very much like, we just want to have fun, forget it. So there's a whole pre-World War II history of the nightclub, like I mentioned, but I just wanted to kind of fast forward. So in Germany, I guess Germany is the first place that discotheque was like on record as having a disc jockey. So there was a club called Scotch Club, which opened in 1959.
No way.
And the first DJ, this is a quote, was 19-year-old local cub reporter Klaus Curini, who had been sent to write a story about the strange new phenomenon of public record playing. Fueled by whiskey, he jumped on stage and started announcing records as he played them and took the stage name DJ Heinrich.
Oh my God. That is so awesome. I love it. DJ Heinrich.
The best. I'm like, this is the perfect fact for New Year's. Like, I just, like, you just want to party after this.
Oh my
gosh.
Stupid
and the best.
Bam, you're like, this is like a double whammy. Origin of DJs and origin of discotheques.
Right?
Like, holy, that is so awesome. And origin of disco music. Hello.
I know.
Oh my
Oh my
gosh,
gosh.
I love it. So he just went from being like this journalist guy to being like, okay, I'm a DJ now.
I
DJ
know.
Heinrich. Like the fact that he had a name.
I know, I
Oh
should have
my
looked
gosh.
more into this guy. I didn't, unfortunately, but
love it. That is amazing.
so like most clubs in the States, even up through the 50s, still used live bands or a jukebox. But then things in Paris started kind of like, yeah. So
Oui, oui.
there was a woman named Regine Zilberberg, or just she called herself Regine. People knew her as that. She was a Belgian-born woman. She was born to Polish Jewish parents, and she spent much of her early life in hiding from the Nazis in occupied France. But by 1953, she was out there. She was a singer and a nightclub manager who eventually
No
dubbed
way.
herself the Queen of the Night.
I want to dub myself something.
Right?
Just make people start calling me that. The queen of the podcast closet.
So she founded in Paris a club called Le Whiskey a Go-Go. And it says here it was founded in 1947, I believe. But it looks like
so early.
1953 might be, because there's 2 dates here. But anyway, it says here 1953 she laid down a dance floor, suspended colored lights, and replaced the jukebox with 2 turntables that she operated herself, so there would be no breaks between the music. So
No
people
freaking
credit her
way.
as basically creating the first proper discotheque.
What?
Isn't she amazing? She's like this
And for it to be
impresario
a
who was like,
woman, who the hell would
Right?
have thought at that time?
and who had to be in hiding, and she's like, screw this, let's party, and she just like, and
She's,
the
like,
turntable
living
thing.
her best life.
Come on.
That
Like, I know
is
everything comes from
so
somewhere.
cool.
It's not like I don't really believe in the idea of genius that people just come up with stuff on their own out of the blue. So maybe she had some kind of inspiration there with the 2 turntable thing,
But still, she's the first to
she might not
implement it. She might not have.
yeah,
Maybe she created that.
She might have been like, let's just,
Whoa.
yeah. I know. Is that so
That
fun?
is. What was her name again? Queen of the Night?
Yeah. Regine, yeah. You could just call her Regine
my
too.
Gosh.
But yeah,
Queen of the Night kind of makes her sound
yeah.
like a madam.
I know.
Like, but whatever.
Yeah. I know. But
I love that.
yeah. In 1957, she opened, just a little more about her, she opened Chez Regine, an enormously popular like nightclub. And she opened other locations like in the major cities, London, LA, New York, right?
Oh my gosh, I want to see a movie about her life. Damn it.
I know.
That sounds
and some of the clubs
amazing.
weren't successful, but she was still so ambitious. And
Right.
they say when she moved to New York in the 1970s, and she opened some more clubs there, I think. They say at that point there were 25 clubs bearing her name across 3 continents. And that you
shit.
could, I think, what was the statistic? It was something like, you could party anywhere around, like at some point, anywhere around the world, you could party for like 17 out of 24 hours of the day. Because one of her places would be open. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
So I was like, dang, lady. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah,
Okay, so
get it,
I just need to
girl.
go back a tiny little bit. In London by the 50s, there were some coffee bars that started to offer afternoon dancing, right?
Okay.
They weren't like the nightlife kind of thing, though. It was in the daytime.
That's
Coffee
the
was the
origin
drink of
of
choice.
the Starbucks CDs that they sell.
Well, it's kind of like Pop Tates, it sounded like, with the Archie thing. Because even it was geared towards really young people, too. So it's kind of like, let's go have coffee and dance a little bit, right? It's kind of like, okay.
Okay.
And apparently, like a lot of European immigrants to London were, they practiced their English there. So it's kind of like a little hub.
Okay.
The most famous of these coffee bars was Les Enfants Terribles. Sorry, terrible accent. It was run by a woman named Betty Pass, who claimed to be the inventor of disco after she pioneered the idea of dancing to records at her premises basement in 1957. So there's a bit of a
Ooh, rivalry. Interesting that it's another
kind
woman.
of, or I know, but
I really
think
like the
Regine
name of her
kind
place.
of- yeah, I know, right? Anyway, so back to America, discotheques began to appear in New York City in 1964. A lot of them were like, some clubs offered dancing between jazz sets, so it was just kind of like a little bit of dancing. But a lot of them were smaller and private clubs, often in like hotel, Like they'd take a certain floor or like a suite in a hotel
cool.
or the basement of a hotel, and they'd be like, let's dance. It wasn't until 1966 that larger clubs opened, such as Cheetah,
Ooh.
which had room for 2,000 dancers.
That sounds, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but that sounds exactly like something that Stefan on SNL would be like, we're going to Cheetah.
Right, exactly. It was such a perfectly stupid discotheque name. I'm like, yes, of course it's going to be called Cheetah.
Of course.
Some of the names are terrible, and I will list them pretty soon here. So that being said, discotheque wasn't really taking off yet like it was in Europe. Like in Europe, they were just like, discotheque. Like discotheques are huge even like now, where it's just
They
the
still
thing
call
you
it
do.
discotheque, yeah.
Yeah, and it's
In
adorable
Holland,
and
anyway.
tacky, and I love it. But like a lot of American kids were just into rock and roll and like the tougher dive bars and stuff. Okay, so I just want to go back to Europe again. We're just going back and forth here. So when Berlin was still divided, there were a bunch of popular nightclubs, I'm assuming on the fun side. And they had such names as Big Apple, Piper Club, Why Not, Crash, and Sugar Shack.
Oh my
I totally felt like
gosh.
Stefan too just now.
That was exactly it.
There was also an underwater discotheque called Yellow Submarine.
Oh my God, what? This is made up. That's not real.
I know. No, it's there.
Oh my God.
And one called Mrs. Henderson, which was frequented by Mick Jagger, Freddie Mercury, Donna Summer, and just anybody famous went there. It was like
way.
this huge thing, right? It was kind of like
Wow.
the hot place to be. Then in 1967, Germany's first large-scale discotheque opened in Munich. It was called Blow Up. Apparently, like it became like the biggest club because it became known for its extravagances and excesses and stuff like that. So by the 60s, we basically already have discos being synonymous with decadence and drugs and just total wild abandon and celebrity
Okay.
hotspots. So it's the place to be all of a
Okay.
sudden, right? It's not just like, let's have fun. It's very
It's like
much
they
like,
want to be there and be
let's do
seen.
hedonism, just like.
Okay.
Right? So again, it is like, I guess, makes sense with the nightlife. Like people would probably, there would always be those hotspots for celebrities and, you know,
Yeah.
with the jazz clubs and everything. But it's almost like there were new rules for discotheques where they really pushed the bar.
But I feel like that
So-
it's a bit more of like it lends itself a bit more to like exhibitionism in a way where it's like they
Yes.
go there to be seen, because if you're thinking about like a rock club, for example, or a jazz club, like the focus is much more on the band and like
Yes.
it's a much darker setting, and like because with discotheques it's like the dance floor in the center, right? You could really show off your outfit, you could show off like how
and they
your
were
dance
often
moves
very
and,
brightly lit. Like they weren't actually these
Yeah.
dark, dank kind of like, you know, things. It was
Yeah.
very much a show, right?
yeah.
On that note, actually, this is kind of interesting when we're talking about this. Disco in the States has its roots in the underground club scene, right?
Oh, okay.
During the early 70s, clubs were places where the oppressed or marginalized groups would basically gather and where they could be free to be themselves. So gay people, African Americans, Latinos, Italian Americans, Jews, they could basically, it says here actually, they could party without following male to female dance protocol or exclusive club policies. So I didn't even realize that there was a male to female kind of like dance protocol, like that they would
Yeah.
police it that much. I didn't think they'd care in any kind of nightclub, right? But
Right.
so it actually became a safe haven for marginalized groups, like these little clubs, right? So I think a lot of people argue that that's actually why disco became so popular, disco music, because it was so closely tied to these clubs where people felt safe and they like could just party and be
And
themselves.
just do whatever they wanted to do and express
Exactly. Yeah,
themselves and stuff.
exactly.
Cool.
So by the 70s, there were a ton of clubs where they actually hired DJs to play disco hits. And like some fancier clubs would have their lights timed to the beat. So it was a whole production, right? So New York was basically the big hub for disco music and that kind of thing. It was just like, I think where people, some of the best clubs in the world were at the time. I know like, stuff was happening in Europe too, but like, you know, New York is New York, right? And in the 70s, that's when the typical disco stuff started coming out, like the disco fashion, like the long sheer Halston dresses, and guys like, those dopey shirts that they all wore. And like certain dances like the hustle, and I forgot all the other ones, but because I only think of the hustle.
Can I just say that I know that everybody looks like down on disco times, but it's the one like decade that I wish that I could live in, because I love the fashion of it. I love that people put that level of effort into going and dressing a certain way and having dance moves, and men danced, and like they made a big deal out of it, and everybody like they would spend the week learning the dances and doing the moves and like getting ready, and like it was such an event, and it was such a like
there were
to me, I'm like,
competitions.
that's what I wish us going out to the club was like now. Like I would do that. I'd come up with some routine or whatever, or like I don't know, I love the idea of it so much.
Yeah, because I mean, back then it was still all about like drugs and hooking up and all that kind of stuff, like it is now. But it's like they still had that element of like showmanship in a way.
Yeah,
and the fun and the Yeah. So I mentioned the drugs that became a huge part of the disco scene as well. It was kind of like hand in hand. At the time, okay, just to be clear, there were other clubs. Obviously, there was just the typical rock and roll kind of club. There were also punk clubs and glam rock clubs and psychedelic music kind of clubs.
Cool.
And they all kind of clashed in a way where I know just from that Hip Hop Evolution documentary I mentioned before, the punk clubs actually were more open to the rappers, like more like street rappers. And
oh, really?
Yeah, it was this interesting kind of, like that's how Blondie actually met Grandmaster Flash, right? Like they kind of... some like their paths crossed more easily, right? But then they had like the cheesy disco, and then like the more
also I think
like
it's
the
funny
Sugar Hill
that
Gang.
Blondie is associated with punk stuff, because it's not.
I know, it doesn't seem like it,
I would
yeah,
actually associate them more with like disco, if anything. Maybe it's just because I'm imagining the cover of that album where she's wearing that white dress. It's like, and her hair's like flipped out. It's such a disco-y kind of look.
I know, it's so funny thinking about like why were they punk? But anyway.
I mean, I guess I see it in certain ways. It just
Okay, so now I'm just gonna get into one of the most famous, the most famous discotheque. Let's be honest, Studio 54,
right?
Manhattan. It was operated by Steve Rubel and Ian Schrager. Okay, so it's located on 54th Street in Midtown Manhattan. The building actually opened as the Gallo Opera House in 1927.
Oh.
Then it was the home of various entertainment venues until 1942. Then CBS came along and they turned it into a radio and television studio, and they called it Studio 52.
Oh, no way.
In 1976, they're like, let's sell this joint. As I joke, laughing. So in 1977, with a financial backer, Steve Rubel, I think it's Rubel, I don't know, and Ian Schrager opened the nightclub.
It's so late in the 70s. I just assumed it would be early.
They opened it at the height of the disco thing movement.
Oh, which is probably why it became so massive.
Yeah. It's almost like that.
It wasn't one of the forerunners. It wasn't like,
it
didn't start it. Yeah. Okay.
Not at all. Yeah. So I'm assuming people like the Regine thing, and not that she's a thing, I meant her place, and
Cheetah.
What's that other one? Yeah, Cheetah, yeah. Okay. So it only took 6 weeks to transform the space. They actually kept a lot of the former TV and theatrical sets in there. It was like this whole crazy shebang. They had like a open balcony on top, and then like kind of basements, and the balcony and basements were known for like the more, let's say, hedonistic pleasures. Openly, people were doing it, and it's like, okay. So total wild party, and then the dance floor was like the typical disco lights and everything. It cost, I think, $400,000 at the time to renovate.
Okay.
And opened April 26, 1977. They had hired like a bunch of lighting designers, an architect, an interior designer. So they weren't just going into it like opening an empty warehouse and they're like, let's go, right? Let's make this the scene. It was very much this orchestrated.
Right.
We're going to put money into this. We're going to attract like the fanciest people, right?
Yeah.
So unfortunately, a lot of discotheques, I feel like, were catered. Like, even though the marginalized people had their own discotheques, right? I think a lot of these bigger, well-known ones were very like white, rich people, celebrities, you know,
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
they like fund it, and then they would really like to get into Studio 54. It was like this just subjective thing, but it was all based on how you looked, and you know, it was going to cater to the celebrities basically. Like
Yeah.
whoever gave them money, they were going to be like, okay, come on in.
Yeah.
And I think like some nobodies were probably allowed in there, but I mean, you'd have to put on a darn good show.
But it's like anything,
or
right?
have
Where
good drugs or
they're like, that's part of the appeal, though, is to make it exclusive, right?
Of course.
Then everybody
Yeah.
wants to get in. Kind of
yeah.
thing.
So it's kind of, but I had such a strange. It was eye-opening. I didn't realize it was like the safe haven, like just discotheques in general. I didn't know
Yeah.
marginalized people kind of took advantage of it. I had no clue. So I'm like, oh, that's a weird mind shift there.
I
But,
know, that
more
is
on
interesting.
that later.
Yeah. Oh.
So it was super impressive, hard to get into. Eventually closed in 1980 when the owners were convicted for evading taxes. Random Studio 54 and New Year's Eve fact, because it's the New Year's show.
Ooh.
The band Chic wrote a song in 1978 called Le Freak. Le Freak.
Ah, yeah.
It's hard to say when you say chic. Le Freak. After being refused entry to the club on New Year's Eve, 1977, despite having been invited by Grace Jones. And Grace Jones is a Jamaican American
yeah.
model, singer, actress. Like she was this
She was,
You know.
yeah. Big.
star at the time. So I'm just like, oh, what happened there?
Whoa.
So by the 1980s, the term disco had largely fallen out of favor in the States. People just kind of started associating it. Like they made a joke out of the music and the scene, right? So I had this old like VHS tape. I was Rolling Stone History of Rock or something. I can't remember. Some kind of like video where they interviewed all kinds of musicians. It's one of my all-time favorite, I guess, documentaries, whatever
Yeah.
you'd call it. And in it, they mentioned the anti-disco rally. It was an anti-disco event called Disco Demolition Night. And it was concocted by a disc jockey who hated disco music and the White Sox owner, Bill Veeck. He went along with this anti-disco rally thing, the Demolition Night, to drum up business for Chicago's Comiskey Park, right? He just was
Okay.
like, let's just get people in here. Everybody
Yeah,
hates
he's like,
disco,
sure, people are
supposedly.
interested. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The disc jockey said he just planned to blow up some records on the ball field between games. But it actually turned into a fiery riot because a bunch of people who didn't have tickets to the game just stormed in. And they started setting off firecrackers, and they were battling the police. They just really hated disco that much, I guess, that they were
Oh my gosh.
And when I saw in the video, they even kind of laugh about it in the video. I thought it was funny too. I'm like, oh my gosh, they just hate disco music that much. Like, what is wrong with them? Like, you know, because
Yeah.
for me, I think there's a lot of fun music. Like ABBA was very disco, right?
Oh
And
my gosh. ABBA's
like
the best.
it's the best. Like,
Yeah.
there's no denying it, right?
Yeah,
And
everybody
there were,
loves ABBA.
And yeah, there
Can't
were
tell me.
some laughable things because any dance trend or music you'll look
Yeah.
back on, you can laugh about it, right? Because it's
Yeah.
just especially when you're a kid, it's like, look what those silly people used to do,
Yeah.
right?
It's interesting. Like, I don't think there's any other kind of style of music that has had an actual rally to like end it.
Maybe rap, I'm thinking.
But
Because of
such
the, like,
nobody's gone
explicit-
anywhere and been like, we're exploding a bunch of rap.
Oh, I'm just
CDs
thinking
or
there might have been like
whatever.
protests and stuff. You know, those mothers groups who were like,
Yeah.
these are explicit lyrics, and I think there were some, you know,
Maybe I think maybe
things
with
like that.
Eminem that they felt like they could
right,
go
yeah,
against
but
him
definitely
with
not
that.
like
definitely not on this scale though, where it was
No.
like a public thing that happened that
Yeah,
they were
I know,
like
like an
down
actual
with
event.
disco music. It's like, huh?
I know. So I just want to read this quick blurb from RollingStone.com, but an article, not about an article, from an article. For many fans of traditional rock that had little love for disco, the incident, the rally, was nothing more than a bunch of drunks having harmless fun on a summer evening. But for minority groups, the incident had highly disturbing undertones, given many of the perpetrators were white men, and the genre was incredibly popular amongst homosexuals, blacks, and women. It felt to us like Nazi book burning, Chic's Nile Rodgers once said. This is America, the home of jazz and rock, and people were now afraid even to say the word disco. So we kind of came back to the Nazi thing.
Wow.
Where I didn't realize it would be such a like scary thing to watch and such an aggressive thing.
That is so true, because
right?
it's such an aggressive thing, and I can't,
It is.
like I said, I can't imagine them doing that to any other kind of genre of something.
I know. And I thought, because I didn't think, I thought it was like just a white, decadent, like rich person, goofy thing, because I only ever saw I never realized marginalized people were disco dancing. It was very much the Studio 54 celebrity thing that I only knew disco as, right? So I didn't really feel sorry for, right, that it was being attacked or made fun of, because it's kind of like, well, who cares? The rich people will get over it, right? But
yeah, it's fine. Yeah, because you didn't
I
see
missed
it as
that
like an
whole-
outlet or like a
because I wasn't
safe
exposed
haven.
to any of that.
yeah. Wow.
And I was like, just this kind of like sobering research where I'm like, so maybe I should think twice about,
Wow. That's
well, not maybe, obviously I should think twice about things, but I could have gone my whole
Interesting.
life just being like, whatever, disco, and not really knowing. And I'm like,
Not really understanding
okay.
like the. Wow.
Right?
That's
So it has that kind of nice
fascinating.
subcultural thing all the way from the beginning where they weren't allowed to listen. They have live bands or whatever.
I
It's
feel
very
so
subversive.
sad for people. That must have
I
been hard for them to
know.
see, where it's like, but we love disco and it's our chance
Yeah.
to dress up and dance the way we want to dance and like
Right.
live
But luckily
in this
dance
culture
music
we
kind
want.
of, it came along pretty quickly, and club culture, like the club kids, the famous
Right.
ones in the New York club scene, right? They
But
took
I
over
think,
pretty quickly.
like it's the underground clubs still existed, I'm sure. But it is that thing of like, it becomes a little bit more scary, I think, probably if you've already been living in a life of fear, right? Where
Right. It's like
then
you're gonna
it's
stay in the
one
dark,
more
you stay
thing
there
that
and
if you
don't-
listen to disco music, somebody could
Right.
get angry enough to like beat
Yeah.
you up or whatever,
well, that's
right?
the thing.
Like,
You could have been the kid in the, at home just dancing along,
yeah.
right, to whatever videos, and and then suddenly
Yeah.
you can't even do that because it's not the acceptable kind of
Yeah.
thing, and it's just like, oh no.
Yeah. Yeah, that sucks.
So that's that. And I just want to say,
You definitely left it on a Debbie Downer note.
no, I will cheer, but I've go watch. What was his name? I thought I wrote it down. I think it's the Is it Patrick Hernandez? The Born to Be Alive song.
Oh
I think
my
it's Born to Be
gosh.
Alive. Let me just double check. But yeah, it is the best video, the best song in the history. It's my like New Year's favorite. Like that's the one thing that my sister actually got me hooked on it because it's a ridiculous video. Yeah, it's Patrick Hernandez, Born to Be Alive. But you have to watch like the disco dancing competition version of the video because there might be a couple other ones.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh.
I don't know. I think that's the one where
this-
they show it's like an international competition. So they show representatives from all over the world and their moves are insane. And I still laugh about it.
Oh my God, I love it.
I know. I mean, maybe I won't laugh as hard, but some of the moves, I'm like, I can't with this.
Oh my gosh.
But
What was her name? The Queen of the Night? Regine, what's her last name?
oh gosh, it's a tough name. It's like
Sorry.
Zim. That's okay.
Oh, yeah, it was kind of like a Jewish kind of last name. You're right.
Zilberberg.
Zilberberg.
Z-Y.
And what was the name of
L-V-E-R.
her club? The first one, the Go-Go? A Go-Go?
Lewiski a go-go.
Lewiski? Low
Yeah, like-
whiskey? Like the drink?
Like whiskey drink. Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
Low
Go-go.
whiskey, a go-go. I
Yeah.
love that. I'm going to change my name to that. Low whiskey, a go-go.
You know.
I love
was
that. That was
great.
so good. I
I know, it was such a fun party topic. I'm like, I've never had done, topic where I'm
I
like,
feel
dang.
like listening to a bunch of disco music and dancing around like an idiot
Yeah,
while I drink champagne.
It's going to be my New Year's.
Oh my gosh,
Just a little
that's
toast
what
to
New
all
Year's
the
has to
people
be.
who were like, they felt kind of shut down after the rally. I'm like, screw that, let's party.
Yeah, let's own it again, people. Disco.
Right?
Yeah.
I know.
That was amazing. Yay. That was
Aw.
awesome. All right. Well, we hope you guys are having a good New Year's and that you're drinking champagne and you're doing a little disco dance. And
Yeah.
that
And
you
if you're
have
not,
a
that's
happy
okay
New
too.
Year. Yeah.
You can join me on the quiet side where I'll just be,
Eating some baked brie and crying a little.
yeah. And of course, watching Born to Be Alive.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
My 5-minute dance break, and then I'll settle down and
Yeah.
just go to sleep.
Awesome. Well, happy New Year's, guys, and we will talk to you next week. Bye.
Yay. Bye.